like to invite out our mystery guest speaker. This is Gabe Layden, CEO of MachineZone, maker of Game of War, the most popular mobile game in the world. Thank you. So, I thought you were bringing Mariah Carey with you, or maybe Kate Upton.
I think she's backstage trying to get a deal with Nicola right now.
Okay. I was trying out for a part in your next commercial here.
Well, you look good. It would work.
Sword's too small, though, right?
Yeah, too small.
Okay. All right. Anyway, so Game of War has become, Gabe spoke at our conferences in 2011 and 2013 as well. And Game of War since then has become the top grossing mobile game in the world, and it has been in the top 3 for pretty much the whole couple of years since it launched. So that makes your company the most successful new mobile game company in the Bay Area here, also in the US, and one of the most successful in the world. Yet, this all comes from one game, and your strategy doesn't resemble Nicolo's at all, and I wonder how you sort of explain the success. You have 3 million competitors in the app stores.
The game that we wanted to make is incredibly complex. When we started building Game of War back in 2011, we wanted to build something that the whole mobile ecosystem could play together at the same time. Mm-hmm. And what we started building was an Android-first game that was easier to release on iOS. But we built it to be a very engaging, very complex experience with tremendous amounts of concurrency. The translation systems that we built to support this kind of global community coming together inside of a single game. The distribution and technology we used so it could work on Android 2.2 because it does. Mm-hmm. To try to get this ultra hardcore experience that was the exact opposite of what everybody was doing, which was Apple-esque kind of UI, simple, easy to understand experience. Nobody was thinking people want games with thousands of options. And if you look at the PC market or console, they're pretty much all like that. So we said we're going to make a very complex, very large experience, and it's very, very technical. It's really hard. It's close to something like EVE Online. Mm-hmm. It's the largest single shard game in the world. Ever. So it's bigger than Second Life. It's much bigger than EVE Online. And it's very, very hard to manage. It's not something where you could have 10 people working on it. It's just impossible.
There's this gigantic messaging infrastructure underneath.
Yeah, so the back end is built on something that we call real-time messaging, which is a messaging processing technology where we'll announce what we're able to do soon, but we're able to process, it's something similar, kind of the cousin to high-frequency trading. Mm-hmm. So it's not a typical game server. There's no server loop. We're just able to process all the actions in the game incredibly quickly. So it's very interesting tech. We've been working on it for over 4 years now, but it supports, we can definitely handle over 1 million players. In the old version, which Game of War is running on a very old version of the technology, we can handle 1 million players playing together at once, which is, there's no other video game in the world that can do that. So it's a very complicated experience, and it's very hard to run because we've had to do a lot of things that just frankly hasn't been done before.
And if you're like a player, you wouldn't even sort of notice this, right? I mean, you
notice
look
it.
At the screens, and they're static screens.
You notice it in certain aspects of the game. There's certain events in certain parts of the game where everybody does get together, mm-hmm. and it's very hard computationally. So there's a lot of challenges for us still because the game keeps getting bigger, and these big events where there's a king that takes over the whole game has thousands of players fighting over a throne essentially at the same time. And you can see it there. You can see it in the fact that you can view any player at any time. There's no server in the game. It's all just one big environment. Mm-hmm. So it takes a lot of people to run. It's not something that, it's closer to a PC MMO kind of in terms of operations than it is a typical mobile game.
Yeah, you sort of made an impression on me when we were talking about this, and you know, I asked you like, well, why don't you just do more games? Like, why don't you just keep on rolling them out on this platform? And you mentioned that, you know, why doesn't somebody do 4 World of Warcrafts?
Yeah, I believe World of Warcraft was made by 35 people in the beginning, and it ballooned up to 4,000 if you include all the customer service that they do. So these aren't easy. They're very, very complicated. It's very, very hard to run. So frankly, we're understaffed. We could use more.
And what did you grow to now?
We're currently at about 550 people.
That's pretty good. So you came up on stage in 2011 and predicted that user acquisition costs were going to soar out of control, and that was going to cause the industry to really separate into winners and users. And you know, Game of War was sort of what you saw as a solution for you for that problem. How do you sort of look back on all of that prediction in particular?
It's kind of obvious. There's $40 billion or so spent on brand marketing digitally on desktop. And currently only about between 15 and 20% of that has moved over to mobile. And you're going from these very large screens that can show maybe 8 to 10 ads at a time, down to these very small screens that can show maybe 2. So there's a ton of congestion when that $40 billion moves from a very large screen size down to a small screen size. It's like equivalent of taking 3 lanes out of 101. So of course there's going to be a ton of congestion. So there's all this money coming from brands going into the mobile space, and it's going to cause tremendous inflation on the CPM cost. And it's been ramping up, and you're seeing kind of more and more. You'll see a lot actually this Christmas. And I think by 2017, more than a majority of the digital spend will be on mobile. And the mobile phones can't support that many impressions. They actually support much less impressions than desktop. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of money fighting over a much smaller impression pool. So it's definitely going to be a bigger issue moving forward. But that line is a continuation from 2011, you know, to 2017. It'll just keep going, and it's kind of arching upwards now.
So why was the timing so good back in 2013?
Yeah, if you look at top grossing, most of the apps were from 2012. There's a few apps from 2014. I'm talking, let's say, just say top 25.
Today's list.
Today's. I don't think there's any from 2015, at least in the United States. There are in Japan, there are in China.